The land of Palestine, a narrow strip of earth along the Mediterranean coast, where empires have risen and fallen, and where three of the world's great religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, trace their holiest sites. But in the 20th century, this land became the stage for one of the most bitter, unresolved conflicts in modern history. At the heart of the question lies a painful story. Why did Israel invade Palestine? To answer that, we must journey back through centuries of history, colonial politics, waves of migration, and wars that reshaped the Middle East. This is not just the story of land, but of identity, displacement, survival, and the clash between two peoples who both see this land as their home. Before it all, ancient roots and Ottoman rule. For thousands of years, the land known as Palestine was inhabited by a mix of peoples: Canaanites, Israelites, Philistines, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Ottomans. Jews see it as their ancient homeland, the place of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, destroyed by empires millennia ago. After those destructions, many Jews were scattered across the world in what is called the diaspora. By the 7th century, Palestine became part of the Islamic world. Under Arab rule and later the Ottoman Empire, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side. By the late 19th century, the land was overwhelmingly Arab, mostly Muslim farmers, with Christian and small Jewish communities. But far away in Europe, a new movement was beginning to take shape: Zionism, the rise of Zionism. In the late 1800s, Jews in Europe faced intense persecution, pogroms in Russia, discrimination in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and rising anti-Semitism across the continent. Out of this fear came an idea: the Jewish people needed their own homeland. For many, that homeland could only be the land of their ancestors, Palestine. The Zionist movement, led by Theodor Herzl and others, began encouraging Jews to migrate to Palestine. Then, under Ottoman rule, small waves of Jewish immigrants arrived, buying land often from absentee landlords and establishing agricultural settlements. At first, coexistence with local Arabs was possible, but as immigration increased, tensions grew. World War I and the British Mandate, the First World War, changed everything. The Ottoman Empire collapsed and Britain took control of Palestine. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, promising to support the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. But Britain also made promises to Arabs during the war, suggesting independence if they helped fight the Ottomans. Now, Arabs and Jews both believed Britain had promised them the same land. During the British Mandate 1917 to 1948, Jewish immigration skyrocketed. Especially after the Holocaust, hundreds of thousands of Jews sought refuge in Palestine. But for the Palestinian Arabs who had lived there for centuries, this felt like an invasion of their homeland.
Arab resistance broke out in strikes, protests, and a full-scale revolt in the 1930s. Britain responded with brutal force, but the stage was set: two peoples, one land, and promises that could not be reconciled. The UN partition and the 1948 war by 1947. Violence between Arabs and Jews has spiraled out of control. Britain decided to hand the problem to the newly formed United Nations. The UN proposed a partition plan. Palestine would be divided into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, with Jerusalem as an international city. For Jews, scarred by the Holocaust, this was a chance for a safe homeland. They accepted. For Palestinians, it was a catastrophe. How could the UN give away more than half their land to a group that, even with immigration, was still a minority? They rejected the plan. On May 14, 1948, Jewish leaders declared the independence of the State of Israel. The next day, armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq invaded. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War had begun. Israel not only survived, it expanded its territory beyond the UN plan. By the war's end, Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine. Over 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled their homes in what they called the Nakba, the catastrophe. The remaining 20% of Palestine, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem came under Jordanian rule. The Gaza Strip was controlled by Egypt. No Palestinian state was created. For Israel, this was independence. For Palestinians, it was dispossession. The 1967 war, the occupation begins 2 decades later. Tension boiled over again. In June 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel launched preemptive strikes against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. In less than a week, it captured vast territories, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria for Palestinians. This was another disaster. For the first time, Israel directly occupied the West Bank and Gaza, the very lands they hoped to establish as their state. UN Resolution 240 called for Israel to withdraw from occupied territories in exchange for peace. But Israel did not withdraw. Instead, it began building settlements on Palestinian land, a process that continues today. This is where the modern meaning of Israel invaded Palestine truly begins. The military occupation of Palestinian territories after 1967, resistance, and the PLOIN response. Palestinians organized under the Palestine Liberation Organization PLO, founded in 1964 and later led by Yasser Arafat. The PLO launched guerrilla attacks and became the symbol of Palestinian resistance. Israel labeled them terrorists. Palestinians saw them as freedom fighters. Meanwhile, in the occupied territories, daily life was controlled by Israeli military rule. Checkpoints, land confiscations, home demolitions, and settlement expansion created a system Palestinians compared to colonialism.
The First Intifada 1987 to 1993. In December 1987, after years of occupation, Palestinians erupted in a mass uprising, the First Intifada. It was a grassroots movement of protests, strikes, and boycotts, though it also included violent clashes. Images of young Palestinians throwing stones at Israeli tanks were broadcast worldwide. Israel responded with harsh crackdowns, beatings, arrests, and shootings. The Intifada forced the world to pay attention. For the first time, the conflict was not just about Israel and Arab states, it was about Israel and the Palestinian people themselves. Oslo and the 1990s, a false hope that the Intifada pushed both sides to negotiate. In 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed between Israel and the PLO. Palestinians recognized Israel. Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. A Palestinian Authority was created, with limited self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The hope was that this would lead to a Palestinian state within 5 years. But Oslo left the hardest issues unresolved. Israeli settlements, refugee rights, Jerusalem's status, borders. As Israel continued to expand settlements, many Palestinians felt betrayed. In 1995, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who signed Oslo, was assassinated by an Israeli extremist opposed to peace. The dream of Oslo began to die. The Second Intifada 2000 to 2005. In 2000, peace talks collapsed. When Israeli politician Ariel Sharon visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, one of Islam's holiest sites, Palestinians erupted in anger. The Second Intifada was bloodier than the first. Suicide bombings by Palestinian militants struck Israeli cities. Israel responded with massive military invasions of West Bank towns, assassinations of Palestinian leaders, and a full siege of Gaza. Israel also began constructing a vast separation wall, cutting deep into the West Bank. Palestinians called it apartheid. Israel said it was security. By the time the uprising ended, thousands were dead, and trust was shattered. Gaza and repeated wars. In 2005, Israel withdrew its settlers from Gaza but kept control of its borders, airspace, and sea. A year later, the Islamist group Hamas won elections in Gaza. Tensions with the rival Palestinian Authority exploded into conflict, and Hamas took full control of Gaza in 2007. Israel and Egypt responded with a blockade, cutting off goods, fuel, and movement. Gaza became one of the most densely populated and impoverished places on Earth. Since then, multiple wars have erupted: 2008-9, Operation Cast Lead 2012, Pillar of Defense 2014, Protective Edge 2021, 11-Day War 2023-24, the deadliest escalation yet. Each round left thousands of Palestinians dead, cities in ruins, and Israel battered by rockets. Civilians on both sides paid the price.
Settlements and the West Bank today. While Gaza burns, the West Bank faces a different reality. Over 700,000 Israeli settlers now live on land Palestinians hoped for their state. Protected by the Israeli army, these settlements cut the West Bank into isolated fragments. Palestinians face checkpoints, restricted movement, land seizures, and military raids. The dream of a two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside Israel, appears to be slipping away. International politics. The United States has been Israel's strongest ally, providing billions in military aid and often vetoing UN resolutions critical of Israel. Arab states, once united against Israel, have shifted. In 2020, the Abraham Accords saw the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan normalize relations with Israel even as Palestinians remained under occupation. Meanwhile, global movements like **BDS boycott, divestment, sanctions *** call for pressure on Israel until it ends the occupation. Why did Israel invade Palestine? So, back to our question. Why did Israel invade Palestine? The answer depends on perspective. From the Israeli viewpoint, Israel's wars were about survival, defense, and the return to an ancient homeland. The occupation of Palestinian territories, they argue, was the result of wars started by Arab states. Settlements are, to many Israelis, either a religious right or a security buffer. From the Palestinian viewpoint, Israel's very creation was an invasion displacing hundreds of thousands of people in 1948. The 1967 occupation was an expansion, not self-defense. The continued presence of settlements, checkpoints, and military control is seen as colonization. The truth is layered. Israel did not invade Palestine in a single moment. It gradually expanded through war, occupation, and settlement, while Palestinians resisted, often violently, against what they saw as foreign conquest. The human cost beyond politics. This is a story of people. Refugees still carry keys to homes they lost in 1948. Families in Gaza live under blockade, with electricity for only hours a day. Israelis live with the trauma of rockets and the fear of terrorism. Each side remembers its pain. Each side teaches its children its history. And each side fears losing everything. The question, why did Israel invade Palestine, cannot be answered in one sentence. It is the product of history, colonial promises, war, fear, faith, nationalism, and human tragedy. For Palestinians, it was invasion, expulsion, and occupation. For Israelis, it was survival, return, and self-defense. And for the world, it remains one of the most intractable conflicts of our time. Until justice, security, and dignity are granted to both peoples, the cycle of invasion, resistance, and war will continue. History matters. Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe.